My name is Dacia Clay. I'm the audio librarian here at Classical 91.7. While I'm a real librarian, I have a deep, dark secret. I know very little about classical music. I grew up listening to rock, and I know something about jazz. But when it comes to classical, the thing is, I want to learn. And as it turns out, I work with people who know a lot about classical music. Every week on this show, one of my coworkers will give me a homework assignment, a piece of classical music they think I should know, and then we'll discuss it. Come learn with me in the classical classroom. Hello everyone, and welcome to a very special Halloween edition of Classical Classroom. Since it's also our 25th show, we wanted to bring in some of the best classical music teachers we could think of. So graciously joining me today from the Afterlife are Leonard Bernstein, Gould, Aaron Copland, and Igor Stravinsky. Welcome everyone. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Yes.
You probably know Leonard Bernstein best from his music from West Side Story and his direction of the New York Philharmonic. Gould is a Canadian and a very well-known pianist, best known probably for his Goldberg variations, Bach's music. Aaron Copland, who's very well known for his ballet Appalachian Spring, among other things, and for his uniquely American style of composition. And finally, Igor Stravinsky, who is best known for his groundbreaking work, The Rite of Spring. Guys, it is just amazing, if not a little creepy, to have you all here with me in the studio. And
Wonderful to see you. Give me your hand. Shake the hand.
Thanks, Igor.
I shake your hand. How do you feel, dear?
I feel good. Thanks for asking.
Looking well.
Oh.
Everybody says to me, you are looking so well. And I say, you think so, but I don't feel well at all.
Well, Igor, we appreciate you being here today. This is incredible, having you all here. So, what are you guys going to be teaching me today? I am here to learn.
Lernen in German.
Yeah.
Which means to learn. And lehren, to teach, derive from the same place and are almost the same word. And in fact, there are dialects of German, including Yiddish, by the way, in which a lerner means a teacher.
Really?
And there's a provincialism in American speech, whereby you say, I'll learn you.
Oh, no. In Texas, we say, I'll learn you.
That'll learn you.
Okay, it's passable.
So that you see they are interchangeable words, basically, deep down. So when I teach, I learn. When I learn, I teach.
Huh, that's interesting. But, yeah, I think I will leave the teaching to you guys. But I see what you're saying. They're interchangeable. The student becomes the teacher. So, okay, well, how about you, Leonard? Speaking of learning, like, did you grow up playing classical music? When did you learn? What got you interested in it?
I discovered the joy of music, if I may quote myself.
You may.
At the age of 10, on the piano, on this old upright piano that was moved into our house from a relative, the famous Aunt Clara, who moved out of town and didn't know what to do with her heavier articles of furniture, and so we got a piano. A piano. So I touched this thing, and that was it.
Wow, that's kind of crazy that it just happened by chance, that somebody dropped a piano off at your house and it got you into music. Like, imagine if she hadn't. Okay, so you started playing piano, and then what?
As a matter of fact, in order to pay for my own piano lessons in my adolescent years, since my father was very much against paying for serious piano lessons, I had to give lessons of my own.
What?
To even younger people, children of friends and neighbors, in order to make some money to pay for my own. Therefore, I was already teaching piano when I was 12 and 13 and 14.
So you really got into teaching simultaneously, as you were learning. So that kind of explains a lot about you, actually. And how about you, Glenn? When did you get into playing piano?
I have pretty well been familiar with the popular piano repertoire ever since I was a teenager. As a matter of fact, in my days of glory around 12 and 13, I used to give all Chopin Liszt recitals. Those were tremendous events.
A Chopin Liszt recital.
But when I was about 16, I began to going through a sort of selective process. I think everybody does at a certain point, and usually in their late teens, and this was it for me. And I started weeding the things out that, not that I liked less, but that liked me less, that meant less to me really, and showed it. I began making, for myself and for fun, piano transcriptions of things like the Schoenberg Chamber Symphonies and things of this kind.
Yeah, crazy teenage years there, Glenn. So you were both really into playing and teaching and composing really early on in your lives. But so then what came next for you, Leonard?
I had great teachers at Harvard.
Sure.
Of counterpoint, of harmony, of fugue, of orchestration. Walter Piston, Edward Burlingame Hill. But I never had a composition teacher. There was no such thing as a composition teacher. And I've never in my life studied composition with a great composer. The closest I ever came to that was with Aaron Copland, whom I met by accident back on his birthday in November 1937.
Aaron, do you remember that? That's I bet that was something.
Really quite an experience.
Yeah, I bet it was.
We became friends. He heard me play, became interested. I played his music to his amazement. His piano variations, a very difficult piece, which hardly anybody played, but I loved them and I learned them.
Wow.
And so we became close. And everything I wrote from then on, student work, and after I had graduated from Harvard and began to compose more seriously, every bar I ever wrote, I would bring to Aaron Copland.
Good Lord.
It took so much labor. You worked so hard on it over such a long time. And it took, it seemed such a difficult birth, you might say.
He would say, well, that's sort of warmed over Scriabin, or that's just second-hand something. Throw it away. These two bars are fresh. They're you. Work on those. Develop those. That's sort of criticism.
But sometimes it really is necessary to help. But it's a special satisfaction, actually.
He taught me. You have to listen to yourself the way you would listen to an orchestra on the podium. And you have to be critical. And you have to...
Wow. Do you think that that's something that, like, all composers go through? That sort of self-criticism? I mean, like Beethoven. Do you think he ever went through that kind of thing?
In Beethoven's case, he struggled. He scratched out. He never left his rooms. He went crazy. And he kept saying, well, I'm writing only the tip of the iceberg of what I really feel, what I could really write. His room was a mess. His food was uneaten. For 3 days, it was stale. The chamber pot was unemptied under his piano.
Oh, that's gross.
He moved all the time. He couldn't find a place that was right. He kept trying. If you look at those sketches, you see the crossings out. You see the agonies that this man went through. And what has finally appeared as the finished product looks as though it was simply phoned in from God.
Wow.
That's what's so incredible.
Yeah.
But he wrecked himself in his whole life trying to do this, trying to achieve this very inevitability. That's the word for it. It's every note that comes is inevitable. Could have been no other note.
It's so amazing and but tragic at the same time to think that somebody as freakishly talented and incredible as Beethoven, struggled in that way. Mr. Copland, do you think that you have ever sort of found that, oneness with your music? Do you feel like you've expressed what you needed to express? Like, describe your music for us.
Well, I wouldn't want to try to describe it, to tell you the truth, because I might limit it. I think of it as being different kinds of music for different reasons, different purposes, different media. I hope it's varied and that it all sounds like me, despite the variety.
Sure.
Do you want just a drop of scotch?
Mr. Stravinsky, I don't usually drink before noon, but since it's a special occasion, happy 25th episode, everyone.
Your good health. Wonderful.
Dear God. Okay, Igor, thanks. Speaking of distractions, do you guys go to shows? Do you go out to concerts and things like that, Glenn?
No, almost never. I think I've been to about 3 concerts in the last year, all of which were by friends of mine, and it was a political diplomatic duty to go. I'm extremely uncomfortable at concerts, in fact. I find that for me the real approach to music is sitting at home, is the narcissistic one, is listening to recordings. I'm intensely uncomfortable when I have to project within myself what must be going through the mind of somebody else, since I know what goes on. I'm much too close to the business to enjoy it in that way. Yeah. But I love listening to recordings where nothing can go wrong. It's done, and that's that.
I wish that when people are not in a mood to listen to music, that they would turn the darn thing off.
Why is that, Aaron?
Because that kind of casual bathing in musical sounds without listening to it, that's not at all the composer's idea. If you want to really listen to what he has to say, listen. Otherwise, forget it. You know, don't just let it on there as like wallpaper on a wall that just is around you because it makes a kind of pleasant sound.
Listening to it with all our power of attention and concentration.
All right. Well, what about opera? Do you ever go to the opera, Glenn?
Well, actually, no. I am not an opera fancier, with 2 exceptions: Mozart and Richard Strauss, both of whom I adore. I'm extremely interested in Wagner, but I'm not really that fond of Wagner theatrically. I'm much more interested in Wagner musically.
You don't like pointy hats?
Apparently, I'm not a real Wagnerian. No. But the thing which is absolute anathema to me is Italian opera. I simply cannot. I squirm with Verdi and wriggle with Puccini. I'm intensely uncomfortable in this music.
I know exactly what you mean. I am also not a big opera fan. Yeah, but if you don't like opera, what do you like to listen to personally?
You know who my favorite composer is?
Who?
Guess.
Bach?
Bach or Schoenberg, if I were identifying, hopefully, with a master technician, yes. But in terms of spiritual quest, no. Ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Orlando Gibbons.
Who?
There is only one that I'm aware of, the Orlando Gibbons, the late 16th, early 17th composer.
Sorry, I've never heard of him. So why this guy?
In the sense that whether he's right or whether he's wrong, or whether he is putting anguished cross relations, as he loved to do, the G naturals against the G sharps, the end of modality, the beginning of tonality, you know, whether he's writing the purest hymns that could have been done by Purcell or Handel or Mendelssohn or whatever, or Charles Wesley, I can put myself somehow into his schematic shoes and say, yeah, I would have done that at that time, you know.
Oh, that's interesting, Glenn. I kind of thought it would have been somebody more contemporary. Speaking of, since I have you all here, I've got to ask, where you think classical music is going? What do you think about classical music now? Where do you think it's headed? Aaron?
Well, I think that the young composers are living in a rather difficult time from their own standpoint, because music is in a great state of turmoil, much more of a turmoil than the great public at large knows about.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I hear that from a lot of younger musicians that I know. What do you think it's going to take to change that?
Well, one thing it will take is familiarity. You must be able to hear these things more than once, and more than 10 times would even be better if you lend yourself. What seems like a spastic rhythm now, 10 years from now, would seem like an exciting one, perhaps. It might remain spastic, of course.
Sure.
But things tend to, when they become familiar, to change their character in our minds. The proof of it is, of course, the rhythms of Stravinsky, which seem so unconventional at the time that he first wrote them in the 1918 period.
Yeah, that's a great point. Igor, do you remember that period?
It was in 1912 in Berlin when my Firebird and my Petrushka was played by the Russian ballet. The Kaiser was there.
The Kaiser?
And so I saw all the generals and so on.
Oh my God.
Afterwards I knew that they said that too much noise.
Wow, that is so hard to imagine, because now your music is considered, as sort of part of the standard repertoire, and to think that it was once called noise that's wow.
I mean, the rhythm of 5/8 or 7/8 used to be a drama. No one had rarely seen a combination of quick-moving music which changed rhythms in every measure. That was really going too far, they said at the time.
Yeah, and if you think of the influence that technology has had on music and just the sheer pace at which it's produced and shared now.
Yes, I mean, our idea of sound, after all, has changed. Think, the way we make sounds, the word sonic is in everybody's mind. That was not true 30 years ago. Breaking sound barriers, using sound to investigate whether ball bearings are working well or not. I mean, it's bound to influence music. It must influence music. Of course, I think what's coming up for question is whether the very things we use as musical instruments are necessarily the things we ought to use. I mean, should a man blow into a pipe in exactly the same way he did in the period of the Greeks? I mean, is there a better, easier, more effective, more delightful way of making musical sound?
Yeah, that makes me think of the band Purity Ring. They make their own instruments that light up, and it just makes this entirely new, sort of alien sound.
Get a little closer,
I think there's very little in it that could not have been done by a dramatic calculator achieving precisely the same distance, same effects, without being propped up,
But they're not propped up. I mean, it's good stuff.
I'm very permissive in my attitude. Let them try it out. Let's give them plenty of rope.
You guys are harsh.
I think, in fact, that we are coming to a time, I think the entire cultural sensibility is coming to a time in which the old stratified notions of composer and performer and listener and so on become intermingled. I think that there is one perceiver which also has a reflexive angle, and that is the doer as well, and that the listener and the maker are intermingled. And in a way, that takes us again back to our old fond thoughts a few minutes ago about the medieval age, because the performer as composer, as listener, becomes like the illustrators, the medieval illuminators, who served a purpose larger than themselves.
Interesting.
And it seems to me that what went wrong in music went wrong indeed in the 18th century, when the composer and the performer and the audience split off and became isolated. And I would like to see them back into sounds corny, but some kind of cosmic rapport once again.
That's, something like Eric Whitacre's virtual choir project is a great example of how people are sort of beginning to heal that fissure between audience and performer, composer. It's all sort of becoming one giant collaboration again. So, Leonard, I gotta hear what your thoughts are. What do you think about music now and where it's going?
I believe that a great new era of eclecticism is at hand.
Really?
Eclecticism in the highest sense. And I believe it has been made possible by the rediscovery, the re-acceptance of tonality, that universal earth out of which such diversity can spring. I believe that from that earth emerges a musical poetry which is by the nature of its sources tonal and that by metaphorical operation there can be devised particular musical languages that have surface structures noticeably remote from their basic origins, but which can be strikingly expressive as long as they retain their roots in earth.
Wow. Well, that is going to have to be the last word. That was very well put, Leonard. Thank you. Mr. Bernstein, Mr. Copland, Mr. Gould, Mr. Stravinsky, thank you so much for coming all the way from the Afterlife to the studio today. It has been such a pleasure, super creepy, and really enlightening to speak to you today.
Thank you.
Yes.
Listeners, if there's anything that you would like to hear addressed on the Classical Classroom, please feel free to send me an email at dclay@classical917.org. If you'd like to hear past episodes or see what's coming up next on the show, please check out our webpage at classical917.org/classroom. We put some special new Halloween content up there for you. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Happy Halloween!